Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today, we're talking about the top 5 baits for bass fishing in March. I have been waiting and waiting to do this video. I am so excited that March is right around the corner because in bass fishing, March marks the beginning of spring. It doesn't matter if you've got snow on the ground. It doesn't matter if you've got ice on the edge of your lake. March marks a shift in bass behavior. Bass are beginning to push shallow, period. Now, you may be way down in the south where bass are already up on beds doing their thing, right? There's a lot of variation in this country. But if you're in the entire core of the country, March is a big bass month. It doesn't matter if it's already warming in your area or if it's still cold in your area, the fish are making the moves. It has to do with length of day. It has to do with water temperature. There's a lot of variables, but they'll make that move whether or not it's still cold outside. And as a result, they are feeding. March is a big fish month and it's a power fishing month. Now, can you go out there and throw a Senko or a shaky head? Of course you can. But you can also go out there and throw a swim bait, a chatterbait, a crankbait, a jerkbait. We're going to talk through some of these key baits, and today's video is very different than most videos. We always link the baits that we talk about in the video description in every video. I don't care what platform you're seeing this on, YouTube, Facebook, TacticalBassin.com, somewhere else. There's always a description. You may have to figure out how to open it. You may have to go down and click more again. You might have to click the 3 little dots, or you may just scroll down and see it. But there's always a description with the baits linked in it. But today, there will be more information in that description than there will be in the video itself. I didn't bring 100 baits to talk about. This is supposed to be the top 5 baits. It's actually 6. But in that description, I'll break it out for you. So you're going to want to figure out how to look at that thing. Bait number 1. These are in no particular order, except for bait number 1. I am so pumped to put the chatterbait back into the mix. The chatterbait is such a fun way to catch fish. It's responsive. When you're out there and it's cold in the morning and you're fishing and you're throwing a bait that doesn't have a lot of movement, there's no interaction until a fish eats it. A chatterbait, whether you're getting bit or not, you're going down the bank and you feel that thing thumping on the end of the rod and you just feel like you're doing something. And the chatterbait's so adaptable. We use the spunk shad on the back of the chatterbait a lot. This is the 4.5, this is the 5.5. For most people, the 4.5 is the main trailer. I throw the 5.5 a lot. I like to bulk it up. I like that bigger profile of the 5.5, and I like how whippy that tail is. See, that longer tail allows us to bump and work and pop the bait. So it's not throw it out, straight retrieve. You'll feel that blade vibrating. You'll pull fish, they'll swim up and eat it. But when you figure out how to add reel bumps or rod twitches into your retrieve, and that bait starts to cut and dart and pop and move, that is when the true power of a chatterbait paired to a spunk shad comes into play. If I could only have one chatterbait, bar none, any conditions in the month of March, it's a jackhammer, 1/2 ounce in green pumpkin shad. That's that guy right there. And then I'd pair it up to a very similar trailer. And again, I'll link that in the video description for you. Now, there is a time and a place for the bright, bold, the day glow orange, the red in the month of March. It is a fish catcher and it can get some giant bites as well. I'll link that in that video description also. But I am so excited that that chatterbait is coming back into play. I use it as a fish locating tool. I can cover a ton of water. I can be fast. I can be aggressive. I can slow down if I need to. But when I catch a fish, then I can stop, pick up other baits, and see if I can catch a bunch of fish out of that school. Because in March, when bass are moving shallow, they tend to do it in groups. And that's my goal in March, is to use fast moving baits to locate groups of fish. Because if I just go down the bank slow fishing, I'll probably catch some fish. Let's be honest, March is a good month. But if I cover a ton of water with fast baits and I can locate a school, then I can sit in one place and get them cast after cast after cast. And that is one of the coolest things in bass fishing. All right, next up, again, no particular order here. It's the jerkbait. This is the Megabass Vision 110. That is the staple jerkbait on the planet. If you are a jerkbait fisherman, the 110 is the baseline. Everything else is judged above and below that bait right there. The Vision 110 is incredible. Now, there are a couple of other baits that are really special in spring because the amount of light that they throw, because the amount of flash that they give off. The power of a jerkbait is in triggering a feed response. So this is not a slow, steady swim. This is rip, pause, rip, pause. Getting a fish to look, to come to it, and then when it makes that sharp movement, to lash out and attack. It draws a feed response even when they're not necessarily in the mood to feed. And one of the best tricks that I use in the spring is to take a jerkbait if I have located a school with another bait, because the jerkbait, I can't cover that much water. If I've located a school, I can take a jerkbait and use it to try to get a bite. Because when bass are schooling, if they're lethargic, if they're all sitting around and nothing's happening, that's one thing. But if I can get the smallest bass in the school to bite, that will typically change the mood. If I can get another little one to bite, that'll get them going. Next thing you know, the whole school is going crazy. And you just fire back in there, get another one. Fire back in, get another one. And all of a sudden, the giant, the 6-pounder, the 8-pounder, the 12-pounder that's sitting in there with those fish gets caught up in the chaos and it eats too. And that was a fish that was smarter than the others. It's been through more. It wasn't gonna eat a jerkbait, but it gets caught up in all the chaos and it makes a mistake. The jerkbait is a powerful tool in March. Again, in the video description, I'll give you a couple different baits and the key colors for each one of them. But to keep this moving along, I'm gonna skip over that right now. Next one up is the Squarebill. The Squarebill crankbait is at least a top 2. The last couple of years, it's been my number 1 in terms of how much I throw it each day in March. There's days in March where I go out with a Squarebill and I never even pick up another rod the entire day. The Squarebill, much like a chatterbait, allows me to cover a ton of water. I get good feedback from the bait. This particular bait, the Bill Lewis ATV, is almost unsnaggable. I have enough confidence to throw this into the center of a laid down tree and just wind it through the branches, and it comes through. It is the most weedless of any Squarebill I've ever thrown. The beauty of a Squarebill is that you can stop and go as well. You can play with that bait, just like a chatterbait. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And you can get fish to react without even bumping into cover. Just in the middle of the water column, by adding those starts and stops, you can get them to lash out. Now again, there's a couple of other baits. There's one, the ATV is the most weedless of all. It's incredible. I have a different bait that I use if I want to play that start and stop game non-stop. I have a different bait that I use, a flat-sided bait when the water's really cold. I'll link all that stuff in the video description. Next up is the A-Rig. The A-Rig is a proven fish catcher in spring. It crushes them. When bass head shallow, they want to eat. The A-Rig presents an entire school for them. Now, the size of the A-Rig and the size of the baits on it matter a lot. So Tim and I partnered up with Hog Farmer, and we developed the tactical rig. It comes in a flex rig, that's the biggest one, then the mini, that's this, then a micro, the little tiny guy that you could throw on a spinning rod if you want to. If you don't like A-rig fishing, that thing is the one. And then we developed the 5-hook, because there's a lot of guys in states where they want those extra hooks. So we did that as well in the mini size. But the one other thing that you may never consider with an A-rig is the difference between these two, other than number of hooks: bladed, non-bladed. The vast majority of people throw a bladed rig, and it's for good reason. They have more drawing power. They pull fish from farther. They get a lot of reaction bites. But if your water is clear, or if you go through a period in the spring where you don't get a lot of rain and your water gets clearer than normal, because clear is different from one fishery to another. On one fishery, clear is 40 feet of visibility. On the next fishery, clear is 18 inches of visibility. If your water on your lake gets clearer than it normally is, don't be afraid to try a non-bladed rig. The A-rig bite on a bladed rig will shut off and you think it's over, but you go to a non-bladed and they keep eating it. Just a quick tip for you. All right, next up, the Lipless. The Lipless is another one of those just absolute staple baits. You've got to have it. We spend most of our time in March bottom hopping the Lipless rather than burning them. You can burn them on flats. You can burn them over emergent grass. You can catch a lot of fish doing that. But we always catch our biggest fish bottom hopping. So we spend the vast majority of our time doing that. This is the Jackal TN70. This little guy, the Nomad Swimtrex Max, 1/2 ounce. So huge size difference. This is a 1/2, this is a 3/4. And I switch back and forth between them. Colors, of course, can vary across the spectrum. I will always have some red and orange baits in the mix in the spring, always. But I'll also have that bold white Lipless, and I'll have a natural handy as well, something ghosty, just in case for that clearer water situation. But bottom hopping a Lipless can be amazing. And then last but not least, that brings us to the big bait. March, there is an opportunity to catch a giant bass, a truly giant bass, and a big swim bait is one of the best ways to select for that fish. You know, as I look across these, I've caught fish up to 11 pounds on a chatterbait. I'm not bragging, I just want you to understand this. Fish up to 13 pounds on an A-rig, fish up to 12 pounds on a jerkbait. Like big fish on these different baits through the years. I've been blessed to fish for a lot of giant fish in a lot of amazing places over a long period of time. But all of those baits are baits where you catch that giant in the mix with other fish. The swim bait is different because you can select to target the bigger fish. Now, you'll still catch small ones. You'll catch a 2-pound bass on an 8-inch mag draft. But the likelihood of catching the giant goes way up. The bigger the swim bait, the more drawing power that it has. The 8-inch mag draft, if they are targeting shad, you know, gizzard shad, threadfin shad, herring, shiners, anything like that, the mag draft with the boot tail is incredible. If they're targeting trout or kokanee, I use a completely different 8-inch bait. Again, I'll link that in the video description for you so you understand the differences, and I'll give you our favorite colors for each of those baits as well. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the glide bait. Now, the glide, we can go big. I've got giant glide baits, but I find that the smaller glides, like this little trick shad here by Buka brand, this style of bait is so aggressive, meaning I can twitch it so fast, but it almost stays in place. So with a glide bait, I actually go quite a bit smaller than I do with the soft bait. The value of a glide bait for me is the ability to target shallow water fish right up against cover. So meaning I'll come into a cove and I see a stump sticking up and I can throw the glide past it, swim up to that stump, and then I can add those twitches in, almost like I would with a chatterbait or a squarebill or an A-rig, and I can make my moves right at the perfect spot to try and draw the fish out of the cover. And by sticking with those smaller glide baits that are much snappier in their movements, I don't leave that piece of cover. I do it right next to the stump, and I'm still right there in the strike zone. Same thing with, you know, boulders on the shore, laid down trees, bushes, docks, dock pilings. I could pick a dock apart, throw past each piling. You'd be amazed how many fish you can pull out of a single location when that's not a big, wide, gliding glide bait. People get obsessed with these big, wide glides. They're great for certain situations. A lot of times in March, we're talking about fish that are pushing the bait, pushing the bank in less than 6 or 7 feet of water. And I can pick it apart with a cover glide. If I want to cover some water, I'm immediately switching over to that soft bait and making those longer, slower casts. And I catch a lot of giants doing that as well. Again, in that video description, if there's room, I'll link some budget rods to throw a lot of this stuff as well. Just depends how much space I've got there. But guys, March is an incredible time to be on the water. You can catch a lot of really big fish. You can catch a lot of fish. It's a lot of fun. Get out there and take advantage of it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.